Thank you very much, Lord Heseltine. I think we've got a little bit of time to actually take some questions from the audience as well. So if you'd like to pop your hand up if you'd like to ask a question, and then say your name and where you're from, and then Lord Heseltine will answer.
Peter Dorr, serial entrepreneur and unsuccessful candidate for mayor. Can I contradict you on wanting growth hubs? We had those, they were business links and various other things, and they were awful. Now they've gone, we're getting much more exciting because the private sector is actually stepping up. Yesterday I was at a superb service offered by Grant Thornton's called G. In Cambridge we got the Eagle Labs with Barclays, and what happened with Business Link and the like is that they take the customers away from the good guys through subsidy, and keeping it in the private sector is, I think, a very important thing to do.
Well, this is a classic dilemma for someone like myself, because I have got not the first idea of A, what the Business Link in Cambridge was like, or what the alternative services to which you refer. So, I'm bound to lose the argument. Of course, I don't believe I should lose the argument, because if the Business Link was so bad, you should have done something about it. And secondly, I happen to know the figures, that Business Link was attracting 2 million hits a year. Just think of that. 2 million businesses a year, or repeat businesses, were ringing Business Link for advice. So I wholly reject the idea that they were no good. Some of them were not up as good as they should have been, but that's because the local people didn't improve them or complain or do something about it. I would myself be immensely surprised if the private sector was willing or able to produce the total package of support that the Business Link should be on offer. And I don't know of another country which relies on a private sector solution. I do know something about the scale of what other governments make sure happens, and I'm just about to publish a report on industrial strategy, and I include the figures from Germany, for example. The huge support across the world for German industrial exporters. It's largely publicly financed. I will give you a figure that I know full well. The London Chamber of Commerce has 20,000 members. The Paris Chamber of Commerce has 300,000 members, all getting the service that they're looking for. So we, in my experience, are amateurs when it comes to supporting our companies in one way or another. But you can say to me it's not good enough here, it doesn't work, or it's working better now. I cannot begin to know.
Morning. If I can attempt a little bit of almost sycophancy, sir.
I can take any of that.
I would just encourage everybody in Cambridge to listen hard to what Lord Heseltine says. In Merseyside, he is still known by all sectors, including the trades unions who were supposedly negative, as our Minister for Liverpool. The work he did in Merseyside in reversing often government-sponsored downturns in the economy was tremendous and is still very much appreciated. I came across you, sir, 21 years ago when General Motors Europe were trying to close Vauxhall plants at Ellesmere Port. And I put together the plan using EU documentation to save it and prove it was viable. There was a gap in the funding of some £30 million, which was a lot of money in those days. And Lord Heseltine said to David Wallace, the strategy director, I will back you. And I used that assurance to get the balance of the funds out of the US parent company. We did it. and it became the most productive plant in General Motors Europe, the most efficient plant in General Motors Europe. And there was constant communication with Lord Heseltine, his guidance and his advice. I was 21 years younger, and it was wonderful. So, at the risk of sounding sycophantic, I can honestly say this gentleman knows what he's talking about, and he is incredibly helpful if you listen like he listens. Thank you.
Well, that's more than kind. I want to go back to your point about Business Link, because I do listen. Now, you said some very sharp things, and I wholly respect that. How many people in this room have heard of Business Link? Everybody. How many of them think it was no good? I listened.
That's an oversight.
No, but it's fair, isn't it? You were very aggressive. I don't see the mass of support.
What I said is it squeezed out private suppliers.
Yes, I understood that, but it might be doing a good job. But I mean, I just, do I go away from Cambridge today saying, yes, my God, I was roughed up over Business Link? or do I say, well, actually, it didn't seem to be doing as much harm as perhaps it seemed to have done. I did listen. Sorry, next question. Please.
Yeah, Michael Anderson Brown from the, put it with my Chamber of Commerce hat on. Right at the beginning, you did identify the spider's web, having worked and run companies in Cambridge and been involved in the Cambridge area for a very long time now. You are right, there is an enormous spider's web. Can you give us a few insights on how we dismantle it?
Yes, I mean, the government could do it overnight, but they'd have to take the political flak of creating a mayoral authority for the whole area, which I think they should do. They wouldn't have to, but they would be advised to get rid of the district councils, to save a lot of money. And they would have to, again, which they could do, adjust the frontiers of the local authorities that remain to reflect the economy as it is. And a combined authority could do that. A mayoral combined authority could do that. That would enable, in my view, a devolution deal more ambitious than you've got, with more local discretion. It would enable the private sector to play a more powerful role because they would be involved in the combined authority structure, which is what they are by definition. They can do it by putting orders through the House of Commons, but there would be local controversy. That's why, ever since the 1960s, we've moved like snails, or not at all. So it can be done. It can be done. I think, in my own view, I don't know the personalities, someone here in Cambridgeshire should be raising these issues. It should be a part of a wide debate. The web is so intrusive, so slowing, so putting off of decisions. It should be a matter of profound concern to people who depend on the wealth that the community creates and whose livelihood depends on their ability to do the job as effectively as our competitors overseas. So someone, somewhere, needs to raise these issues.
Hi, I'm Amy. I work for Anglia Ruskin University, but previously worked in economic development across the whole of Cambridgeshire. I'm really interested to hear about your spreading the benefits and thinking just outside the Cambridge bubble, I suppose, and having now come to work in Cambridge very recently. Something we still have in Cambridgeshire is a big problem with inequality, especially from the north of the county. Have you got any suggestions, I suppose, for how we can help to spread that benefit and really use the potential actually of a significant number of people that have more to give in other areas of the county?
Yes, you have one person elected by the whole area. Because that is the truth of it.
Yeah.
That democracy is a very eloquent mover of activity. If you have someone who has to get a vote from the wider areas, they will listen. But if they are only representing a smaller area, and it goes even more dramatic than that, because if you're a councillor, you actually can be elected to represent a very unrepresentative part, even of the city that where you are a councillor, let alone the whole of the economy that you are part of. So one identified person, there they are. In every other economy in the world, there is one person who in the end carries the can.
Tim Harvey Samuel, I'm the bursar of Corpus Christi College. Lord Heseltine, you've delivered a number of very large, or been instrumental in delivering a number of very large infrastructure projects across different areas of the country. They must have also been subject to spider's web type interference structures. And my observation would be our needs are relatively simple. We need infrastructure and we need housing. We've got an economy that's compounding locally at 7% per annum, extraordinarily.
Yeah.
And we have some of the worst housing affordability ratios in the country. The very wise advice that you have for us about centralising authorities, unfortunately outside, I think, the control of most of us in this room. So I'm quite interested if you have any more granular observations from your experience about how you delivered big projects against a context of parochial, short-term, local electorally driven resistance.
Well, there's no unique method. At the one extreme, development corporations. There's no shadow of doubt that the work that I did in the East End of London and on Merseyside in the 1979 period did lay the foundations of very considerable rejuvenation, and you now see that on Teesside, in the North East, in the Midlands, and a whole range of other places where that process has been adopted. It was fiercely resisted by local authorities when I did it in 1979. The last that I did, well, no, I did one on Teesside fairly recently, but by the 1990s, we were negotiating voluntarily with local authorities for development corporations. They had become such an obvious vehicle, usually in areas of acute dereliction, where the number of people involved was very small because you were dealing with vast areas of wasted land. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is the mayoral authority. That within a mayoral authority you can devolve powers from London to the locality, and you can put somebody in charge and you can give them budgets which are at their discretion. And that has begun to happen. It's happened here in Cambridge and Peterborough, and I'm sure that it will have its benefits. But it's too small for the local economy. So there's a lesson in that. But it was negotiated voluntarily. As I said at the beginning, I had hoped when I was here with Greg, or whenever it was, that we had got broadly agreement for a much wider mayoral authority, which is what I think it needs. But that didn't come about. So those are two very big areas: massive devolution and the local accountability, or direct mayoral authority, development authorities, and they're not separate. You can do the two together, and I think it's quite difficult for me to see what I know of this area. Well, I may be wrong about that. It may well be that perhaps in the corridor for Oxford, Cambridge, Milton Keynes, there will be areas for development corporations. The virtue of a development corporation is it concentrates land acquisition, planning and execution in one body, full stop, one body, one person in charge, local authorities represented, private sector represented. But there is another gain, and that is land. That using a development corporation mechanism, you can get the planning gain, the enhanced value of the land for the benefit of the local, for the community. So you can agricultural land, probably 10,000 an acre here, something like that. I may be wrong, by and large. Okay, but planning enhances the value hugely. You don't need to give the planning gain to the owner. You can compensate them by paying, say, 20,000 an acre or whatever it is, but the real gain you keep for the benefit of the community. And that's a huge potential. But so if you've got a station for a line, the economic opportunity of that station is huge. It's just not a station. It is potentially a community. If you see it like that and you take the gain and build with the private sector, but keep the profits, a lot of it for the benefit of the community, that's another thing you can do. I think certainly we should do it with HS2. HS2 doesn't affect you, but the stations on HS2 will be phenomenal economic power centres. Big, you know, and very largely private sector financed, you know. So there are then other mechanisms available within, like local development orders, which deal with much smaller areas. If the will is there, it's amazing what you can achieve. And incentivization, you see, I've done a lot of government schemes. The Regional Growth Fund, I was chairman of that. It wouldn't have affected this part of the world, but it's instrumental in what you can do. It was designed in 2010 because the coalition knew it was having to make big cuts in public sector, and public sector expenditure is disproportionately spent in the outlying areas. All sorts of reasons why we've helped to support some of these areas in the northwest, southwest, Wales, Scotland. So you cut public expenditure, it has less effect in areas like this, where it's a smaller proportion of the economy than in the outlying regions. So the government created a committee and made me chairman in order to put a lot of money into these areas. And the first thing that we said, it's competition. Not, you're a poor area, here's your money. That's the wrong way to do it. The right way is to say, you're a poor area, you're eligible to bid. Tell us what you'll do if you get some of our money. Secondly, we're not going to give you all the money. You're going to have to find partners, so that when you bid to us, if you ask for £1, we want to know what local people are going to back that pound with. We got £3-4 of extra money for what the public could afford, but you also had the discipline that you knew that people genuinely believed in what they were asking you to spend money on and could see a viability. And this was largely industrial support. So it was a very interesting experience. So that's another weapon. Endless permutations on this. I did it in City Challenge in the 90s with deprived estates, talking about these are literally local authorities, estates, and frankly we all know where the deprived estates are. You know, they're the places you pass. You don't go. You don't want to know. It's where problems are. We all know about them, but they're not part of one's normal experience. So I became involved, having dealt with derelict land in the 80s. I was going to deal with rundown and impoverished communities in the 90s. So I invented a system whereby I said, I've got £350 million of public money, much more than it would be today, and I'm going to divide it into 10 packages of £35 million, and I'm going to spread each 35 million at £7 million a year over 5 years. 10 packages. 30 authorities with deprived estates were invited to bid. There was an outcry. How can you treat poverty as a subject of competitive activity? I said, okay, you know, I understand the argument, but I'm going to do it. First of all, it had the most amazing effect for various reasons. They were the conditions of the competition. The conditions of the competition were that in order to get one of my packages, you had to show you would create a discrete management team to administer the program of improving the deprived community. Secondly, you had actually to talk to the people who lived in the deprived community and get their view about the plan you were putting forward. Thirdly, in order to prepare the plan, local authority officials couldn't simply say, well, we need more housing, or we need more social work, or we need more policing, because that's not a plan. That's one aspect of the plan. And so all the specialists in local government had to do what they never did, which was to sit in a room and say, this is what the area needs, and it's what the local people will accept and want. So 10 won, outcry. What about the other 20? Oh, we'll do it again next year. And the other 20, having done their bit to defend why themselves had failed, largely by blaming me, rushed off to the 10 who'd won and said, how do you do it? And next year, the 20, many of them won. But the effect of competition and gearing and making it participatory for the people who lived there was electric. It was probably the most successful thing I ever did.
And on that note then, if it's the most successful thing you've ever done, I think it's an appropriate time to draw it to a close and say thank you ever so much, Lord Heseltine, for joining us today and for your directness.
I've nothing to lose.